A billionaire goes undercover in his own luxury hotel and uncovers a secret he never saw coming. In today's captivating story, we follow a wealthy hotel owner who decides to pose as a regular guest, curious to experience life on the other side of the front desk. What he finds will challenge everything he thought he knew. The rhythmic click of Caleb Whitmore's polished Italian loafers echoed across the glossy marble floors of the Alleion, his family's flagship hotel in downtown Vancouver. At 33, Caleb had the grace of someone raised in old money, but his steel gray eyes carried a quiet exhaustion that made him look older than his years. As he crossed the grand lobby toward the private elevator, staff subtly turned their heads to watch him pass. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," the concierge called out with a nervous smile. Caleb gave a brief nod, forcing the corners of his mouth upward, but the gesture didn't quite reach his eyes. The elevator doors slid shut, and he leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. His reflection stared back from the mirrored interior, a man in a flawless navy suit, sharp tie, and polished cufflinks. But Caleb didn't see refinement. He saw the invisible weight pressing on his shoulders, the legacy, the name, the expectations. In his top-floor office, he stood at the window, overlooking the city. Several towers bore the name Whitmore, gleaming in the afternoon sun like silent monuments to a legacy he hadn't chosen but was now expected to carry. His fingers absently brushed the engraved nameplate on his desk. Caleb Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Hospitality Group. "Your 9 a.m. is here, Mr. Whitmore." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Send them in, Laura," he replied, adjusting his tie. The board meeting passed in a blur of financial forecasts and market strategies. Caleb contributed on autopilot, his nods and answers practiced. But inside, a growing sense of disconnection gnawed at him, a feeling that had shadowed him for months. That evening, alone in his expansive penthouse, Caleb sat with a tumbler of aged scotch. The television murmured in the background a travel show, the kind where hosts trekked through jungles and danced with strangers in far-off cities. He watched as they shared street food and laughter, their lives simple, spontaneous, free. His phone buzzed. Another message from his mother. "Any updates on the gala? Or when you'll finally settle down?" He turned the screen over, ignoring it. His thoughts drifted, uninvited, to his father's final words 2 years ago. "The Whitmore name is on every door, son. Make it count." But what did it count for? What did it mean beyond power, beyond appearances? As he poured a second drink, a notification pinged onto his phone. Tomorrow's itinerary, staff meeting, 10:00 a.m. The Alleion, the crown jewel of the Whitmore portfolio. Caleb stared at it, and something stirred. What if he saw the hotel not as its owner, but as a guest? Anonymous, unrecognized, unfiltered. No VIP treatment. No boardroom status, just a man walking through the world his family had built from the other side of the welcome desk. The idea felt reckless, risky, potentially humiliating if discovered. But for the first time in a long while, Caleb felt alive. He felt it. For the first time in years, something like breathless excitement. Caleb picked up his phone, fingers hovering above the screen. One call. That's all it would take. A single favor from his most trusted contact in HR, and the entire plan would be in motion, a new name, a fresh identity, and a rare chance to step out from beneath the Whitmore legacy. He took a breath and dialed. "Hey, Jonah, I need a favor." And yeah, it's going to sound a little crazy. When he hung up, Caleb turned back toward the window. The city lights glittered below, reflecting against the glass. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be Caleb Whitmore, heir to one of the country's most prominent hotel empires. He'd be someone else. Just another guest, blending into the rhythm of the hotel his family had built. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for. Freedom? Perspective? Maybe even a forgotten version of himself. But whatever it was, he had to find it. The next morning, he stood in front of the mirror inside his walk-in closet, surrounded by rows of tailored suits and Italian shoes, and reached for none of them. Instead, he pulled on a simple button-down shirt, one he'd picked up the night before from a local department store, and a pair of faded jeans that didn't fit the polished world he came from. He tousled his usually perfect hair, letting it fall more naturally, then slipped on a pair of plain glasses. He barely recognized himself. And that was the point. "Nice to meet you," he said to the mirror, testing the name. "Ethan Hart." The man staring back at him smiled. The drive to the Alleion felt like a dream. He had taken this route hundreds of times, but never like this. Never as a stranger. He pulled up to valet. For once, no one rushed forward to open his door or greet him by name. "You've got this," he murmured under his breath, handing his keys to a young valet who barely glanced up. Inside, the lobby unfolded like a living sculpture, sleek, modern lines softened by warm lighting and subtle notes of lavender in the air. Classical music hummed in the background. The crystal chandelier sent tiny rainbows dancing across the marble floor. Ethan, not Caleb, took it all in. For the first time, he wasn't inspecting it as a stakeholder. He was simply seeing it. At the reception desk, a young woman welcomed him with a warm, practiced smile. "Good morning. Welcome to the Alleion. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Ethan Hart." The name slipped out easily. He almost didn't recognize his own voice. Guilt tugged at the edges of his conscience, but he brushed it aside. As she typed, Ethan glanced around, absorbing the ebb and flow of hotel life from the ground level. A group of sharply dressed professionals swept past, heading toward the conference center. Nearby, a family juggled bags, strollers, and two tired toddlers. A bellhop rushed to help them, and Ethan made a mental note to revisit the check-in process for families. Then his gaze landed on someone near the concierge desk. A woman. Dark hair pulled neatly into a low bun. She was speaking animatedly, with a couple hands moving with expressive warmth as she gestured toward the map in front of them. There was something about her, focused, effortless, completely in her element, something that didn't feel rehearsed. "Mr. Hart?" The receptionist's voice pulled him back. "Your room is ready, Deluxe King, room 1408. Would you like any assistance?" "No, thank you." He accepted the key card, then hesitated. "Actually, who's that woman over there?" He gestured subtly toward the concierge area. The receptionist followed his gaze. "Oh, that's Sofia Morales, our events coordinator. She's amazing, always one step ahead, always thinking about the guests. She seems..." He paused, searching for the word. "Incredible. Would you like me to introduce you?" "No," he said quickly, maybe too quickly. "Just curious." He moved toward the elevators, stealing one last glance at Sophia as she laughed with the couple. There was a presence about her, something genuine and unscripted, so unlike the calculated control he was used to in his corporate world. In room 1408, Ethan dropped his suitcase and walked to the window. The city of Vancouver stretched out before him, shimmering under the mid-morning light. But for once, he wasn't thinking about skyline views or real estate value. He was thinking about the woman near the concierge desk. And for the first time, he wondered, what else had he overlooked, hiding behind his own name? Ethan wasn't thinking about occupancy rates or quarterly growth projections anymore. Instead, he found himself staring out the floor-to-ceiling window of his room, watching the slow drift of lives on the streets below. People hurrying to catch a bus, laughing into phone calls, sipping coffee on benches, lives unmeasured by spreadsheets. Then a knock. Housekeeping. He opened the door to find a petite woman with silvering hair and gentle eyes. "I'm Lily," she said with a warm smile. "Just checking if you need anything, love." "No, thank you, Lily. Everything's perfect." As she turned to leave, she paused and gave him a curious look. For a moment, Ethan's heart skipped. Did she recognize him? But then she smiled again, something knowing in her gaze, and walked away. He closed the door, leaning back against it as his pulse steadied. This was it. He was in. No titles, no treatment. Just another man in a hotel full of strangers. Maybe now he'd finally see what had been hiding in plain sight. The next few days passed like a series of small awakenings. He dined in the hotel's sleek restaurant, where the lobster bisque was indeed spectacular. But what struck him most wasn't the cuisine. It was the staff, their warmth, the way they remembered guest names, joked with regulars, noticed empty glasses before they were lifted. He jotted notes in his phone under a growing list titled Things I Never Noticed as CEO. At the gym, he struck up casual conversations. A business traveler from Chicago praised the in-room coffee machine, but groaned about slow Wi-Fi. A couple from Melbourne raved about the rooftop bar, but mentioned the frustrating elevator delays during checkout hours. Every voice felt like a revelation, every small complaint gold. In the evenings, his head buzzed with ideas. What if employee spotlights weren't just for top managers? What if he invested in more staff-led innovation? What if the hotel felt as alive to its guests as it was to the people who ran it? On the third evening, he saw Sophia again. He was nursing a quiet gin and tonic in the bar, watching the soft glow of pendant lights reflect off glass and granite when she walked in. She looked different, still polished but more real. Strands of hair had slipped loose from her bun. A stack of folders weighed her down. There was tension in her shoulders. "Long day?" Ethan asked as she slid onto the stool next to him. She blinked, surprised, then smiled, and it hit him like sunlight through fog. "That obvious?" she asked, setting down the folders with a sigh, only to someone paying attention. He raised his glass in a mock toast. She laughed, not the polite kind reserved for clients or strangers. The real kind, warm and unfiltered. "And Sofia Morales," she said, extending a hand. "Events coordinator, or as I like to say, chief chaos wrangler. Ethan Hart," he replied smoothly. "The staff speaks highly of you." Conversation flowed easily after that. She told him about the upcoming charity gala. She was planning a night of old Hollywood glamour to raise money for local children's hospitals. As she spoke, her eyes lit up. She described vintage lighting, a live jazz band, curated cocktails from the 1940s. It wasn't just an event, it was a vision, and she cared deeply. "It sounds incredible," Ethan said honestly. "I don't suppose you could use a volunteer?" The words escaped before he realized he meant them. Sophia stared at him. "You're serious?" "Absolutely. Well, yes, I could use some help," she said with a tired smile. "Things have been a little tense around here lately." That caught his attention. "Tense? How so?" She hesitated, biting her lower lip. "It's probably nothing," she said at last. "Just whispers about a possible buyout. You know how these things go in corporate." A chill ran through him. A buyout? How had he not heard about this? He kept his expression neutral. "That does sound stressful." She sighed. "Yeah. But that's all the more reason to make this gala unforgettable. Something good. Something that reminds people why this place matters." He nodded, lifting his glass again. "Then let's make it happen." "You're right," Sophia said, her smile returning, softer now. "And I really would be grateful for the help." They continued talking, the hum of conversation around them fading into background music. Neither of them noticed Lily, standing near the far end of the bar, polishing a glass with slow, deliberate movements. She watched them with quiet curiosity. She'd seen 1,000 guests pass through the Alleion, but something about Ethan Hart made her pause. There was a familiarity in the way he moved, in the quiet authority behind his casual charm. Something she couldn't quite name, but something her years of service told her not to ignore. Later that evening, as Ethan wished Sophia good night and headed back toward the elevators, he felt a warmth in his chest. It wasn't the gin. It wasn't even the satisfaction of helping plan a meaningful event. It was her spark, her laugh, her quiet strength. He stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut with a soft chime. And suddenly, reality pressed in. The buyout rumor. It gnawed at him. If it was true, it meant massive changes, possibly layoffs, culture shifts, damage he hadn't foreseen. But how could he find out the truth without revealing who he was? And why, of all things, did the thought of disappointing Sophia weigh on him more than disappointing the board? The elevator doors opened on his floor. Ethan stepped out, a quiet resolve settling over him. Whatever this is, I'm not walking away from it. The days ticked by, and with every shared task, every stolen laugh, Ethan and Sophia grew closer. Their work on the gala shifted from coordination to collaboration, and eventually to friendship. One afternoon, they sat side by side in a quiet conference room, surrounded by table layouts and place cards. The soft hum of the air conditioning was a calm backdrop to the flurry of planning. Sophia, looking up from a seating chart, tilted her head at him. "So, Ethan," she began, tone playful but probing, "what brings you to Vancouver? Business or pleasure?" Ethan hesitated. The lie sat heavy in his chest, but he nodded with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "A little of both. I'm a consultant. Took a bit of time to explore the city between projects." Sophia seemed satisfied. "Well, I'm glad you did. You've been a lifesaver." As they talked, Ethan found himself opening up, sharing snippets from his childhood, stories from travel, moments he hadn't told anyone in years. Everything carefully crafted to avoid one name, Whitmore. Sunlight spilled across the table, casting a golden glow on Sophia's face as she listened. You know, she said with a twinkle in her eyes, for a consultant, you have a suspiciously good eye for hotel operations. Ethan laughed too quickly. Just observant, I guess. And then, deflecting, tell me more about this charity. You mentioned the Children's Hospital? But across the halls and behind the scenes, Lily was still watching. She'd overheard enough snippets, disjointed details, inconsistent stories, phrases that didn't quite line up. Her instincts, refined by decades of unspoken hotel wisdom, were rarely wrong. Something about Ethan Hart didn't add up. That evening, as Ethan returned to his room, he found Lily finishing up a room nearby. The hallway smelled faintly of lemon and fresh linens. Evening, Mr. Hart, she said, her tone friendly, but her gaze lingering just a second too long. Everything to your satisfaction? Yes. Thank you, Lily. But, as she walked away, Ethan stood frozen for a moment. She knew, or if she didn't yet, she would. Inside, he sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. The weight of the lie pressed harder than it ever had before. He had wanted truth. He had wanted connection. But he had built it on a false name, and it was starting to fall apart. The next day, Ethan and Sophia met in the sunlit atrium to review the event budget. Laughter and light conversation carried from nearby guests, but Ethan barely heard it. His phone buzzed. Daniel Whitmore, office. He froze. The name flashed on the screen like a spotlight. He silenced it quickly, shoving the phone into his pocket. Sophia caught the movement. Aren't you going to answer that? It's not important, he said too quickly. Her eyes lingered on him for a moment, searching, but she didn't press. Still, something had shifted, and Ethan knew it. So, Ethan said, clearing his throat, where were we? His voice sounded tight, distant even to himself. Sophia glanced up from the budget sheets, eyes softening. She could sense something had shifted. They returned to work, but slowly, unintentionally, Ethan began to speak more freely. Little truths slipped out. Nothing that revealed his name, but enough to reveal the weight he carried. Sometimes, he murmured, eyes drifting toward the cascading plants lining the atrium, it feels like I'm living someone else's life. One I didn't choose. Sophia reached over, her hand finding his, a simple gesture, warm, steady, but it sent something electric through him. I understand, she said quietly. It's not easy, trying to live your own truth when the world expects something else from you. Their eyes met, and for one brief moment, Ethan nearly said it. Who he really was, but fear held his words hostage. Fear of unraveling the only genuine connection he'd felt in years. When they parted ways that evening, the guilt followed him like a shadow. The quiet rhythm of his days shattered the next morning. As he passed through the lobby, he caught hushed voices near the bar. Tucked behind a cluster of potted palms, instinct pulled him to pause. Vertex Hotels is circling, a gravelly voice said. They've put a number on the table, and it's a big one. The Whitmore family will never sell the Alleion, another replied. It's their signature property. Word is, the son the new CEO, he's not as committed. Vertex smells blood in the water. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Vertex. Known for hostile takeovers, for gutting everything that gave a hotel heart, leaving only polished exteriors and slashed budgets. If they got their hands on the Alleion, all the warmth he'd rediscovered here, the laughter, the service, the soul of it, gone. He found Sophia in her office, surrounded by swatches, seating charts, and sticky notes. Hey, he said, trying to sound casual. I overheard something in the lobby. People were talking about Vertex Hotels, about them trying to buy the place. Sophia froze, her pen slipping from her fingers. How do you know that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That's supposed to be confidential. I just overheard it. Suits talking near the lounge, he added quickly, heart thudding. Sophia leaned back in her chair, the fatigue catching up to her all at once. It's real, she said, voice low. The staff's anxious. Everyone knows Vertex's playbook cut jobs, trim services, turns soul into spreadsheet. She looked up at him, something fragile in her gaze. This hotel, it's not just where I work. It's family, and it's in danger. Ethan felt it deep and protective. A sudden, consuming need to shield this place, these people. There has to be something we can do, he said, more to himself than her. Sophia tilted her head. You seem pretty invested. for a guest. He looked away. I've just grown attached, I guess. The words burned as they left his mouth. The lie tasted like ash. That afternoon, Ethan made discreet phone calls, burner lines, and back channels, trying to confirm Vertex's movements without tipping off anyone who might recognize the voice behind the alias. The headache started around 2 p.m. By 4, his stomach was in knots. The double life was becoming unbearable. While grabbing fresh linens in the staff hallway, he caught wind of hushed whispers, Lily. He paused just around the corner. I'm telling you, she murmured to another housekeeper, there's something off about that Ethan Hart. You think so? It's the way he talks, the way he walks. I've been here long enough to know when someone's pretending. Ethan slipped away, his heart pounding. He'd underestimated Lily, and now the clock on his cover was ticking down. That evening, as he and Sophia stepped outside together after another long day of prep, the golden hour sun cast the hotel in a soft, almost cinematic glow. For a moment, things felt normal, like they were just two people, two hearts orbiting something bigger than themselves. Then voices, laughter, the sharp scent of expensive cologne. A group of men in tailored suits stepped onto the sidewalk in front of them. One of them turned, recognizing Ethan. Ethan froze. So did the man. Recognition flickered. Daniel? The man said, confused. Daniel Whitmore? Sophia turned, eyebrows lifted. Ethan's world stilled. The scent of expensive cologne lingered in the air like smoke as 3 sharply dressed men walked through the grand entrance of the Alleion. Ethan froze. He knew them instantly. Jeffrey Roth, CEO of Vertex Hotels, his right-hand man, the CFO, and one more executive whose name Caleb hadn't bothered to learn, but whose presence confirmed it. The takeover wasn't just rumor anymore. Excuse us, Roth said brusquely, barely acknowledging them as they passed by. Sophia turned to him, her face draining of color. That was Jeffrey Roth. This is worse than I thought. Ethan nodded, jaw tight, pulse racing. He couldn't hide much longer. The stakes were too high. People's jobs, the hotel's soul, everything was on the line. Sophia, he began, voice catching in his throat. There's something I need to tell you. But before he could say more, her phone rang. It's my manager. I have to take this. She walked off, disappearing into the crowd as the lobby buzzed with chatter and movement. Ethan stood alone in the middle of it, surrounded by laughter, music, and soft jazz drifting from the nearby lounge. But inside him, it was silent chaos. The moment of truth was closing in. That night, the charity gala transformed the hotel into something almost dreamlike. The grand ballroom shimmered with gold accents and vintage chandeliers. Crimson roses adorned every table. Soft candlelight flickered against champagne glasses. It was old Hollywood brought to life. Sophia stood radiant in a deep red gown, her hair swept elegantly to the side. She moved through the crowd with effortless grace, thanking donors, laughing with guests, all while managing every detail behind the scenes. And by her side stood Ethan Caleb in a tuxedo that felt like a costume. He wore the suit, but it didn't feel like him, not anymore, not with the lie growing heavier by the second. He kept looking at her, her laughter, her focus, the way she lit up the room, and all he could think was, she trusted me, and I lied to her face. Halfway through the night, Caleb spotted Roth again deep in hushed conversation with members of the hotel's board. He drifted closer, staying just within earshot, the hum of the jazz band barely masking their words. It's a strong offer, Roth was saying, voice low. It would be a seamless transition. The son doesn't seem invested. We can make this fast. Clean. Caleb's hands curled into fists at his sides. The son. Me. Roth thought he didn't care, that he'd already walked away. Rage flared inside him. He'd built this place. He'd fought for every square inch. And now when it mattered most, he was hiding in plain sight. A tap on his arm pulled him from the shadows of his thoughts. Ethan, Sophia said, smiling gently, the hospital director wants to meet you to thank you. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a sudden wave of murmurs rippled through the ballroom. On stage, Lily stood beside the event MC, whispering urgently in his ear. The man's eyes widened. Then he stepped forward to the mic, tapping it gently. Feedback rang out. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, voice amplified across the room, We have a surprise guest tonight. Please welcome the CEO of Whitmore Hospitality, Mr. Caleb Whitmore. The spotlight moved and landed on him, dead center. The crowd silenced. Conversations dropped. Every eye in the room turned toward him. Sophia did too. Her expression shifted confusion, disbelief, then betrayal. "Ethan," she whispered. "What's going on?" His heart hammered against his ribs. There was no way out now. So, Caleb took one breath and stepped forward. There was no going back now. As the spotlight fixed on him, the glittering chandeliers above seemed to dim, casting the ballroom into a hushed twilight. All eyes were on him. I can explain," Caleb began, his voice unsteady, the truth trembling on his tongue. But before he could continue, a voice thundered through the crowd. "You!" Jeffrey Roth shoved past a line of stunned guests, his expression twisted with fury. "Caleb Whitmore, what kind of game is this?" A gasp rippled through the room, followed by an onslaught of whispers, phones raised, eyes wide. The jazz band stopped mid-note, the music died, and in the silence, Sophia turned to him. Her expression froze, confusion, betrayal, recognition. Caleb caught her eyes, those eyes he'd come to treasure, and saw the wound already forming. "I'm sorry," he said, louder now, addressing her and the crowd all at once. "I never meant to deceive anyone. I just wanted to understand, to see this hotel and all of you through a different lens, one that didn't have my name attached to it." Sophia shook her head slowly, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. Her voice, when it came, was a whisper broken with disbelief. "I trusted you." She turned and walked away, not in anger, but in heartbreak. And that hurt more than anything she could have said. The ballroom, once glowing with laughter and champagne, had turned cold. The clink of glasses was gone. All that remained was the sound of retreating footsteps and the hum of a broken illusion. Caleb stood alone under the spotlight, no longer Ethan Hart, no longer anonymous, just a man, exposed. In the days that followed, the consequences came fast. The press latched onto the story. The board called emergency meetings. PR firms issued statement after statement, and the Alleion, once his sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Every hallway whispered his failure. Every room reminded him of a lie. Every face, staff, and guest alike carried some variation of disappointment, but none stung more than Sophia's absence. She didn't return his calls, didn't answer his texts, didn't acknowledge the handwritten letter he left with front desk staff. It was as if she'd vanished, and yet her presence lingered everywhere. One afternoon, worn down and aching, Caleb wandered into a part of the hotel he'd never stepped foot in as CEO. The staff corridor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Metal carts lined the walls. The scent of detergent clung to the air. There, folding linens with quiet precision, was Lily. He approached slowly. "Da Satu." "Lily," he said, his voice hoarse from days of stress and sleepless nights, "I owe you two things, an apology and a thank you." She glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, then with a slight smirk, "or do you prefer Ethan?" He winced. "Caleb is fine." Lily gave a slow nod, her hands never pausing in their task. "I get it. You wanted to see the truth without the filter of your name. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't mean to hurt her." At the mention of Sophia, his voice cracked. "Have you seen her? Is she okay?" Lily looked at him for a long moment, and then something in her gaze softened. "She's hurt," she said quietly, "but she's strong, and maybe she just needs time." Caleb swallowed hard, nodding. As he turned to go, Lily spoke once more. "For what it's worth," she said gently, "sometimes the only way to truly see something is to step outside of it." Lily's words echoed in Caleb's mind as he made his way back through the quiet corridors of the Alleion. Sometimes, to truly see, you have to step outside yourself. He'd gone undercover to rediscover his hotel, but what he found was himself, the version he'd lost under the weight of board meetings and family legacy. That evening, as he prepared to leave, briefcase in hand and thoughts still tangled, he spotted her, Sophia. She was near the lobby's central column, speaking politely with a guest. Her professional smile was intact, but Caleb noticed what most people wouldn't: the slight tension in her shoulders, the exhaustion behind her eyes. As the guest walked away, he stepped forward, heart hammering against his ribs. Sophia. She turned slowly, her expression calm but distant. Mr. Whitmore, she said, each syllable sharp with restraint. I think you've said enough. He swallowed the hurt. I know I broke your trust, he said quietly. But please, let me explain. Not here, not now, just, coffee. When you're ready. There was a pause. A flicker of emotion passed behind her eyes. Not quite forgiveness, but not total refusal either. Then her voice came, barely above a whisper. I need time. And this, it's not just about me. She motioned subtly to the hotel around them. You deceived everyone. He nodded, accepting it with the weight it deserved. I know. And then she was gone, melting into the crowd like a ghost. But something inside him sparked. He wasn't done yet done. He wasn't going to run this time. The weeks that followed were anything but quiet. Vertex Hotels hadn't backed down. Their acquisition efforts were accelerating, and the staff already shaken by the deception now faced rumors of layoffs and restructuring. Caleb responded with something no one expected: presence. He didn't hide in boardrooms. He walked the hallways, listened to housekeeping, met with concierge teams, sat in on staff training. He opened doors, literally and figuratively, that had never been opened by a Whitmore before. The marble lobby still shimmered, but now so did possibility. He used what he'd learned as Ethan Hart, the small frustrations, the overlooked potential, the human truths beneath luxury polish. One morning, as he sat in his office overlooking the city skyline, the door knocked. His assistant stepped in, a strange note in her voice. Mr. Whitmore, Miss Morales is here to see you. He stood too fast. Please send her in. Sophia entered, spine straight, steps steady. She looked every bit the woman who once held a ballroom together with nothing but poise and grace, but her eyes, those familiar, stormy eyes, held caution, and maybe something more. I've been thinking, she said, her tone measured, about what you said, about talking. I'm ready to listen. He didn't waste the moment. He told her everything, the real reason behind the disguise, his doubts, his guilt, his hope that somewhere in the lie, he'd found something true. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock. Sophia listened, expression unreadable, hands folded in her lap. Finally, she spoke. I understand why you did it. She paused. But understanding doesn't erase the hurt. Caleb nodded, his throat dry. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I am asking for your help. He leaned forward. Vertex is coming. I don't have a full plan yet. I only know that we need to act fast, and I can't do this alone. Your ideas, your leadership, you are exactly what the Alleion needs. There was silence. Then a flicker of a smile, the first he'd seen from her since the night everything fell apart. I might have a few ideas. Over the following weeks, they became an unlikely team. They revamped internal communication, created new guest experiences, launched training and mentorship programs that empowered junior staff. They even hosted intimate feedback forums, giving voices to people who had never been heard, and with every small win, the hotel began to shift. Not just in performance, but in spirit. Side by side, they worked. And slowly, where once there had been silence, trust began to take root again. The hotel began to feel different, alive. The Alleion, once pristine but predictable, now hummed with new life. Chefs in the kitchen experimented with locally sourced ingredients, crafting seasonal menus that told stories of the surrounding region. The concierge team designed personalized city walks for guests, mapping out routes that included hidden cafes and local artisan markets. Even the housekeeping staff, under Lily's quiet but steady leadership, took extra care, leaving handwritten notes, folding towels into delicate origami, creating moments guests would remember. And the guests noticed. Satisfaction scores soared. Positive reviews poured in. And perhaps most telling, guests began returning, not for the rooms or the spa, but for the feeling they got when they walked through the doors. Even the board, typically unmoved by sentiment, acknowledged the shift. The numbers were strong, but the spirit? Stronger. Through it all, Caleb and Sophia worked side by side. What had once been stiff and tense now became easy again. Late-night planning sessions often drifted into shared stories, soft laughter, and quiet confessions. The walls between them began to fall. One evening, as they stood in Caleb's office reviewing the results of their latest community initiative, the city lights flickering behind them like distant stars, Sophia turned to him. Her gaze was clear, steady. "For a while," she said, "I wasn't sure who you really were, Ethan or Caleb, but now I think I understand. They're both you." She took a breath, the compassion, the fire, the way you see people. Caleb felt something lift inside him, like a knot that had finally loosened. "Thank you," he said, voice quiet, "for giving me the chance to try, to do it right this time." Their eyes held, and in the stillness, his phone buzzed on the desk. An email. He opened it. And then he exhaled sharply, turning the screen toward her. Vertex Hotels had officially withdrawn their takeover bid. The threat was gone. They had saved the Alleion. But Caleb realized in that moment it wasn't just the hotel they'd saved. It was something far more fragile, something just beginning to grow. A week later, with the storm behind them, Caleb invited Sophia for a walk in the nearby park. Sunlight filtered through the trees. The scent of blooming jasmine drifted on the breeze. Children laughed in the distance. They walked slowly, not speaking at first. Then, as they rounded a quiet bend in the path, he found the courage. "Sophia," he said, his voice low, "I know we've come a long way, but I still feel like there's a space between us, something unspoken." She didn't look at him at first. Her gaze remained ahead. "When I met Ethan," she said, "I felt a connection I couldn't explain. And when I found out who you really were, it shattered something in me." Caleb didn't interrupt. He let her speak. "But these past few weeks, watching how you fight for this place, how you show up for the people who work here, it reminded me that the connection we had wasn't a lie. The person I saw, that was real." She turned to him. "I'm not saying it'll be easy. Trust doesn't rebuild itself overnight, but I'm willing to try, if you are." Caleb reached out, his fingers brushed against hers. A gentle touch, but it lit something between them. "No more lies," he said, "no more masks, just me, with all my flaws, but also with all my heart." She smiled softly, and in the golden light of the setting sun, they leaned in meeting in a kiss that was not about passion, but about promise, the kind of kiss that says we begin again. Back at the Alleion, they returned to work shoulder to shoulder, laughter now woven into their days. And from her station near the staff hallway, Lily, ever watchful, caught a glimpse of them passing by. She smiled to herself. She'd seen many guests fall in love at the Alleion, but watching these two, she had a feeling this one would last. They worked in rhythm now, effortlessly, easily. Caleb and Sophia partners in every sense of the word. Their laughter, once tentative, now filled the halls of the Alleion like sunlight through tall windows. In the months after Vertex's withdrawal, the hotel transformed. No longer just a polished icon of luxury, it became a living, breathing part of the city's soul. Local artists displayed their work in the grand lobby, changing with the seasons. The rooftop garden bloomed fresh herbs and vegetables, now sourced for the hotel's own restaurants. And most beautifully, a new mentorship program began, offering hands-on training to at-risk youth, teaching them the dignity of service, the strength of hospitality. Caleb had stopped trying to control everything. Instead, he shared the reins. He let Sophia's creativity lead, let her ideas take root and flourish. Together, they navigated challenges as partners, at times clashing, always recalibrating, but never losing sight of what they were building together. One evening, they stood on the hotel's rooftop terrace, the city shimmering below them like a reflection of the stars. The sky was streaked in gold and rose, glass towers mirrored the sunset. Caleb turned to her, eyes soft. "You know," he said, a smile curving slowly, "I came here trying to find myself, but I ended up finding so much more." His voice caught just slightly. "I found purpose, I found peace, and I found you." Sophia leaned into him, her cheek brushing his shoulder. "And to think it all started with one carefully constructed lie," she teased gently. Caleb laughed under his breath, pulling her in closer. "Well, here's one truth I'll never take back." He looked into her eyes, steady and sincere. "I love you, Sofia Morales." She smiled. "I love you too, Caleb Whitmore." Their kiss, framed by the soft glow of city lights, was not a grand finale. It was the start of a quieter, braver story, one they'd write together, 1 year later. The ballroom at the Alleion buzzed with anticipation. The scent of warm pastries and roasted coffee floated through the air. Sunlight streamed in from arched windows, casting golden light across the polished floor. Caleb stood at the front of the room, Sophia beside him, her hand resting lightly on his back. "Today," Caleb began, his voice carrying, "we're not just celebrating our strongest quarter to date, we're celebrating you, every person in this room who made it happen." He paused, looking around at the faces he now knew by name. There was pride in his posture, but no longer the kind born from perfection. This pride was rooted in humility and gratitude. We've become more than just a luxury hotel. We've become a place with a soul. Sophia stepped forward. "We're redefining what it means to lead in this industry," she added, "not just through five-star service, but through community, through impact, through connection." The room erupted in applause. Lily, now proudly wearing her badge as head of housekeeping, stood in the front row, her eyes shining. In the back, interns from the mentorship program clapped with pride, side by side with senior staff. Later that afternoon, as Caleb and Sophia walked through the atrium, they passed the koi pond. Nearby, two guests sat on a bench, sipping tea. "I've stayed in five-star hotels all over the world," one said, "but there's something different about this place. It feels real." Caleb glanced at Sophia, his fingers brushing hers. No words needed, just a soft smile shared between them, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey that brought them here. That night, they hosted a small dinner in Caleb's penthouse. It wasn't extravagant, just candlelight, close friends, and a table full of people who had helped them grow. Sophia raised a toast to honesty, to second chances, and to the magic that happens when you stop pretending and finally let yourself be seen. They clinked glasses. And outside, beyond the glass walls, the Alleion Hotel stood tall against the night sky, not just a symbol of wealth, but a beacon of authenticity. And at its heart, a love story that had once begun with a lie, but became the truth of everything that mattered. It was a quiet dinner, just a gathering of department heads and longtime friends in the penthouse that overlooked the city skyline. Candles flickered, soft jazz played, and the scent of roasted rosemary and warm bread drifted from the kitchen. Conversation flowed easily. Laughter came often. Caleb stood, glass in hand, as twilight deepened over Toronto. "A toast," he said, eyes sweeping across the room. "To authenticity, to growth, and to the people who've made the Alleion not just a hotel, but a home." Glasses clinked. The moment shimmered. Later, as the laughter continued inside, Caleb and Sophia slipped out to the balcony. The city stretched before them in a glowing mosaic of lights. Below, life pulsed, but up here it was just the two of them and the quiet, steady rhythm of something sacred. Sophia leaned into his embrace. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "when you revealed who you really were, I thought my whole world had cracked apart." She smiled gently. "But now, I can't imagine my life any other way." Caleb kissed her forehead, closing his eyes for a beat. "I spent so long trying to live up to a name. I forgot to live at all. You changed that." Inside, they heard the laughter of their team, the people who had helped build something greater than either of them could have imagined. "Ready to go back in?" Sophia asked, her eyes glowing. "Yeah," Caleb said, taking her hand. "Let's go home." 5 years later. The Alleion wasn't just a success. It was a symbol. A flagship for a new kind of luxury, one that balanced elegance with integrity, service with soul, and profit with purpose. On a crisp Saturday morning, Caleb stood in the lobby, sunlight pouring through the tall windows. In his arms was his daughter, Emma, 3 years old and already captivating the hearts of guests with her bright eyes and endless curiosity. "And this," he told her, pointing to a gleaming bronze plaque mounted near the front desk, "is where it all began." The inscription told the story of a man named Ethan Hart, and how one bold experiment had changed not just a hotel, but a man and everyone who worked beside him. A story of reinvention, of mistakes, of second chances, and seeing the world through new eyes. Sophia joined them, looping her arm around Caleb's waist. Her perfume, light and familiar, mingled with the lavender the hotel was now known for. "Telling her the story again?" she asked, her smile playful. "She should know where she comes from," Caleb replied, kissing the top of Emma's head. "The good, the bad, all of it. That's how we learn to build better." They walked together through the hotel's sunlit halls, passing the ballroom, where the annual charity gala was in full swing. The sound of jazz music drifted into the corridor. laughter and glasses clinking. For the city, it had become one of the most anticipated events of the year, raising millions for local causes. In the kitchen, they stopped to greet the head chef. Once a troubled teen from a rough neighborhood, now a rising culinary star and a graduate of the Alleion's mentorship program, his success was one of many, proof that when people are seen, supported, and believed in, transformation happens. That night, back in their penthouse suite, Caleb and Sophia tucked Emma into bed. The soft glow of the nightlight threw gentle shadows across the room. The city glimmered quietly beyond the windows. Sophia turned to him, curling into his arms. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I still can't believe this is our story." Caleb held her closer, his voice rough with emotion. "I wouldn't change a thing. Every misstep, every mistake, it all led us here." They stepped onto the balcony together, watching the city below. It wasn't about legacy anymore, not the way his family had once defined it. This legacy was built of people, of possibility, of love earned, tested, and true. And as they stood together, their fingers entwined, the hotel glowing behind them, and the world wide open ahead, they knew the story wasn't over. The best ones never are. The evening had settled soft and warm across the city. Inside their penthouse at the Alleion, Caleb stood by the window, one arm resting gently on the railing, the other cradling a glass of tea gone cold. The city lights blinked below like faraway stars, and the hum of quiet laughter from the gala still echoed faintly beneath them. Sophia approached, sliding her arms around him from behind, her cheek resting between his shoulder blades. "You're quiet," she murmured. "What are you thinking about?" He turned to her, his eyes soft but alive. "The future," he said, "and how excited I am to face it with you." A voice called from the hallway, small and sweet. "Mommy? Daddy? One more kiss?" They smiled. No further words were needed. Hand in hand, they moved toward their daughter's room, the hallway dimly lit by the soft glow of nightlights and memories. As they leaned down to kiss Emma goodnight, tiny, sleepy, the center of their world, Caleb felt something shift again inside him. Not dramatically, just a quiet click. Gratitude. For the second chance. For the woman beside him. For the life they had built out of what once felt like broken pieces. They closed Emma's door gently behind them. In the hush of the hallway, Caleb turned to Sophia, his voice barely more than a breath. "I love you, Sofia Morales Whitmore." She smiled, her eyes shining in the soft light. "And I love you, Caleb Whitmore. Always." They kissed tenderly, quietly, more a promise than a moment. The kind of kiss that doesn't need witnesses, just two hearts, still choosing each other, still growing, still becoming. The Alleion Hotel stood tall outside their window, its golden lights glowing not just with prestige, but with purpose. It had become more than a destination. It was a story, a heartbeat, a place that held love in its walls and hope in its halls. A hotel built on second chances, on honesty, on seeing people for who they truly are. And like the city that stretched around it, it would keep growing one day at a time. Caleb and Sophia's journey had started with a lie, but it ended with something far more powerful: truth. Not the polished kind, but the real kind. The kind that shows up in quiet promises, small hands reaching out in the dark, shared laughter after hard days, and the unwavering decision to stay to love, even when it's hard. Their greatest adventure was still unfolding, and they would live it together. Thank you for joining this journey. If the story moved you, let it linger. Sometimes the softest endings are the ones that stay with us the longest.